Alright, good afternoon. I am Jonathan, better known as Goodpoltergeist, and I just finished Amnesia last night, around 2, 3 in the morning, somewhere around there. It was late or early. I was very drunk, and I wanted to take some time to record my thoughts on the game. Um, I probably should have written these out a little bit better beforehand, but I got lazy and I didn't. But first off, first thing I want to say is Amnesia is not scary. Contrary to popular belief, Amnesia is not scary. And that's mostly what this is going to focus on, is why I don't think it's scary. Um, um, and whatnot. Now, that being said, I don't think that Amnesia is a bad game. Like, just because I don't think it's scary does not mean that it is. I don't think that it's a good game, because it was pretty well done. It has a very compelling story. That kept me interested. Like, I wanted to find out. Like, it left me with some unanswered questions. Like, I still don't know what the fuck Alexander was. Or exactly what the shadow is, or etc. Like, they're not that important, and they're probably done that way intentionally, because you don't need to know those things. But I was interested in the story, to find out, what the deal is between Alexander, and Daniel, and Agrippa, and etc. etc. So I really wanted to get some sort of culmination, some closure from that, and so I felt compelled by the story to keep playing. So that's good. Like, that's really good storytelling there. So onto the bit about why it is not scary. I regularly used to ask people why they thought this game was scary, and the only answer that I really ever received was immersion. Immersion is why the game is scary. Immersion is not a reason why a game is scary. And this is one of those things that frustrates me. Like, they would say, okay, you have to play this game in a specific way. You have to focus. You have to become immersed in the game. And that is bullshit. If a game is good and is built around immersion, it will immerse you without you having to force yourself to be immersed in it. It will draw you in. It will make you feel like you're a part of the game, without you having to be like, okay, I have to play this game in a dark room with no lights, no people, at night, close all the doors, whatever, and pretend that I am this character. No, you shouldn't have to do it. The game should do that for you. Now, granted, I did all of those things, like, because there are things that you can do to fucking ruin a game's immersion. Like, if I was playing, like, cute, girly K-pop the whole time, that absolutely would have ruined any effect the game. But no, you should not force yourself to be immersed in the game. The game should just draw you into it. And that is the biggest problem I had, is that Amnesia doesn't really do that. People say you're fighting the immersion. No, I was not at all fighting the immersion. Because the game actually it drew me in with the story, and the little diary notes, but it did not draw me into feeling scared, because atmosphere only works to scare people in very specific circumstances. You cannot. I am not a person that is scared by atmosphere alone. I am not a person that is scared by things that are just unnerving. I'm not a person that's scared by things that just like. Actually, that's not true. Okay, because I am a person that, when reading Lovecraft, becomes absolutely terrified. I have a collection of Lovecraft's work that I used to read and like I was not scared while reading it. It was like after I would finish a story, I would think about the implications of the story, and it would just be like, what the fuck? Like some of the Lovecraftian stuff, and that is purely, you know, the cosmic horror, that is purely atmosphere and just creepiness. And that's what Amnesia's going for. That is 100% what Amnesia's going for, because, that's like entirely what the game is based around, and that's why people say that the immersion is such a big deal. Unfortunately, it doesn't do a good enough job of actually immersing you to make you feel that sort of just like creepy, unnerved fear. Plus, it can be a little bit uh, intrusive about it. What with when Daniel goes insane, he suddenly decides to crawl sideways across the floor. That drove me insane. It was just stupid. Now, most of the way I'm going to talk about the way this game is not scary is by comparing it to other games that do frighten me. Because the things that typically frighten me in video games are games like Doom 3. Okay, Doom 3 got a lot of shit after it came out for two things. One, being dark as shit. Like, you cannot see basically ever in that game. And Doom 3 got a lot of shit for that. Amnesia is exactly the same way. You cannot see shit ever in that game. Like, I spent a lot of that game just refusing to use the lantern because I'm stubborn, and because I'm a huge Resident Evil fan. I'm all about hoarding stuff. I'm all about conserving stuff and not ever using it. And so I'd get lamp oil and tinder, never use it. But like, you can't see shit in that game, so you kind of, there are parts where I have no choice. I have to use the lantern because I don't know where the fuck I am or what I'm doing. And I was like, people don't give Amnesia shit for that, but they gave Doom 3 tons of shit for it. The other thing that people gave Doom 3 shit for is that the scares it has are mostly cheap thrills. Things jump out at you from behind walls and corners, and like it's like they're waiting to ambush you. And that terrifies me. That makes me jump. That startles me. That freaks me out. That is the kind of game that scares me. Amnesia, two moments in the game did that to me. They were both towards the end. As I recall, yeah, they were both actually in the choir. The choir torture room. One of them actually should not have been as surprising because I technically knew the monster was there because I could hear it. You can always hear the monsters because it tries to build suspense. We'll talk about that later, but it tries to build suspense by letting you hear the monsters long before you see them. And so it's like, yeah, okay, so I heard the monster, and I was like, oh, there's probably a monster around here. And then out of fucking nowhere, it was in my face, and I jumped. I was like, oh, I said, oh shit, fuck. Those were my exact words, and I jumped, and I said that rather loudly. That scared me. That was one time. The other time, there wasn't even a monster there. It's a room, it's a torture chamber. You walk in, and there's an Iron Maiden, and it's closed. There's a closed Iron Maiden, and you walk up to it, and it springs open, and, like, some blood comes out. I was not expecting that, and I flipped. That was the scariest moment in Amnesia for me, is when that Iron Maiden just opened up. Like, it was scary because it's just, like, unexpected. It jumped out at you. Like, it was right in front of it. Like, I had no time to react. If this was a game where I had a gun or a knife or a hatchet or something and it flew open and there was a monster in there that lunged out at me, I would have had zero time to actually react. So I would have probably yelled. And that's exactly what happened in Amnesia. So that's the kind of stuff that scares me, and that's the kind of stuff that Amnesia does not have. Well, except in that particular instance, because the other one was more my own fault than Amnesia being freaky. Now, the other thing I want to talk is I talked a little bit about how the game tries to build suspense. Like, it does all these creepy things and then nothing can actually harm you, right? It builds suspense by making weird noise and making Daniel breathe hard and hear weird shit and have roaches crawl on his eyeballs, and you see the monster from far away and like it doesn't ever do anything, and then later on, you know, the monster will fuck with you and you're like, oh fuck, but not really, because you have gotten used to the monsters not doing anything. You feel like they're kind of impotent, right? If you want to build suspense in that manner, you have to do something. If you want to build that tension, you have to do something to release all of that tension to scare people. Amnesia does not do that. I want to talk about Dead Space, because Dead Space does that. The first one, not so much the second one. But the first one, absolutely, it behaves very much like Amnesia early on. You'll see an enemy, and it will go away. Like, you'll see it walk by, and you'll see it run down a hall. Or you'll see it, like, through a grate somewhere, and it'll, like, look at you and then disappear. And you're like, what the fuck? And it builds the suspense of, like, okay, what the fuck is happening? And then it'll have something jump out at you. Something that will, an enemy come out of fucking nowhere and attack you. And that releases the tension. It releases all of the built-up suspense, and your adrenaline is fucking pumping. You're like, oh my fucking god! So it's been scaring you slowly. It's been building this tension, building this tension, building this tension, and then Amnesia has no moments. It just builds tension the whole game. It's just tension, 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 tension. The cat is being very insistent that I pay attention to her. So that frustrated me a little bit. Is because it's just tense all the time. And when you're just tense all the time, you're just like, whatever, don't care anymore. Like, you feel invincible. You're like, oh, nothing's really actually going to mess with me. And that brings me to my next point, which is, most other horror games, you have some sort of weapon. You have a way to combat the enemies coming at you. And that, you may seem like, well, that should take away the fear, right? That should take away your fear, because you have this weapon. You should feel invincible behind this gun that you're using to you know, you can kill your enemies, and you can't do that in Amnesia. Yes, but let's take, for example, we could take Dead Space and Resident Evil as examples of this. I think Resident Evil is a better example of it, but they're survival horror games, right? They're survival horror games where you have weapons, kind of. Dead Space, they're more tools, less weapons. But you have these weapons, and you have very limited ammo, especially on the harder difficulties. Like Resident Evil on easy mode, obviously, you're never going to be hurting for ammo ever. But on, you know, some of the more difficult level, or some of the harder difficulty levels, you are given an option when faced with an enemy. You can either fight it, or you can run away. That is an option. You have to make that decision very quickly, because your window of opportunity for running away will close quickly, and your window of opportunity for, okay, I need to fight this thing before it gets too close to me and hurts me, will also usually close very quickly. So you have to make that decision, and that choice creates fear, because you aren't always certain. Like, that itself creates a tension moment. You're like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Okay, well, when you have no weapons, you have no choice. You have to run. You don't even have to think about it. It's just like, oh, fuck, run. Like, it doesn't create a moment of tension where you're like, shoot it, or run away, or, and then, like, you get killed, and you're like, oh, that might have been the wrong decision. The decision you have to make in Amnesia is run away and hide. Which one of those do I do? The answer is both. You run away and then you hide. Or you hide until it walks past and you run away. Like, and that's barely a decision. Like, you know what, every time you encounter an enemy, you know exactly what you have to do. It's not, okay, I have to, do I have enough ammo to take it down? Do I have the right weapon to take it down? Am I healthy enough, you know, to run away from it? Etc., etc. It is, oh, there's an enemy, I need to haul ass. And so that because you know in every instance what you have to do against an enemy, it removes a little bit of the fear. Which brings me to my other point, which is almost the same as this point. It is Amnesia uses invisible enemies. Not all of the enemies are invisible, but particularly when you are in the water. The first time you're in the water, a lot of people describe it as the scariest part of Amnesia because you are being chased by things that you cannot see. Being chased by things that you cannot see is not scary, video game developers. Do you hear me? That is not scary. It is just annoying. It is a cheap tactic for things to kill you. I'm looking at you, Resistance 2. Let me tell you why, and we're going to link this back to Resident Evil because it is actually a good survival horror game. It is both scary, it creates tension, and it leaves you with these choices. However, I played through Invisible Enemy mode in Resident Evil, the remake, the one on GameCube. Invisible Enemy mode on hard mode, right? Take a lot of damage, limited healing items, very, very limited ammunition. The enemies are invisible. Guess what? It was both less scary and easier than just playing the game on hard mode. And let me tell you why. It removed your choice. If you cannot see the enemy to shoot it, you run from it 90% of the time. You'll just try to run past it. And that's all you have to do in Amnesia. You see the invisible enemy, all you do is run. You run, you run, you run, you run, you run, you run, you run. You run away from it. It's not scary. You know it's back there. Maybe you don't even care. It doesn't matter. Just get to the next part of the game. Who cares if there's an invisible thing chasing you or not? It doesn't really matter. You can't see it. You're not scared of it. You just are like, well, fuck, that's a minor annoyance. In Resident Evil, it made it easier. They made the game easier because you were no longer faced with that choice of shooting, or of fighting, or fleeing. You no longer had that choice. You were pretty much like, well, I don't actually know where they are. I'm just gonna run through and hope they don't get me. And that's pretty much what you do in Amnesia. Well, I can't actually see it. It's invisible. Not really scary. Just gonna run through and hope it doesn't get me. And that's exactly how I played all of the water sections. I'm just gonna run through and hope it doesn't get me. The other thing that I noticed about Amnesia. Okay, this is very important. And I will link this game to Dead Space, I will link this to Dark Souls, I will link this to Resident Evil, I will link this to all sorts of stuff. There is absolutely no penalty for dying in Amnesia. Like, you should never actually be afraid of dying in Amnesia. Nothing, like, there's no reason to fear dying. Do you know why? Because nothing happens when you die. You restart the game usually very near to where you just were, and you have accomplished everything that you accomplished prior to dying. You don't have to be like, oh fuck, I died, I have to go do 15 minutes of work over again. I have to go find this and, you know, do this puzzle over again. No, all of that's done for you. That is all done for you after you die. If you did that before you died, then after you come back, after you reload the game, all of that is done for you. There is zero penalty for dying. None whatsoever. There is no penalty for dying, so you should never be afraid to die. If you die, whatever, good to go. Just truck on. You've done everything you need to do. Just move along. Just go. The other thing that goes along with that is that not only is there no penalty for dying, oftentimes the game gets easier when you die. There were a couple times I died when I first got to the water section due to the invisible things, because I turned a crank on a gate too slowly and I didn't get through the gate quickly enough, and I died. You know what happened when I reloaded and went back to do that? The monster was gone. Like, it was gone. Like, the game gets easier when you die. The monster was gone. I didn't have to throw the rotting flesh into the water to distract the monster and raise up the gate and run through it, because the monster was gone. The invisible ass monster was gone. So I just raised up the gate at my leisure, went through the door, and moved on. Easy. The game gets easier when you die. What game does that? Dark Souls doesn't. Demon Souls didn't. The game actually got harder when you died. The enemies got tougher. You had less HP. The game got significantly harder. Also, there was a massive penalty for dying. So you didn't necessarily fear dying, but you weren't comfortable with it. Dying was a bad thing because you lost all of your souls, and it sucked. But you didn't fear dying because you die all the fucking time in Dark Souls and Demon Souls because the game hates you, and you get used to it. So there's no penalty. In Resident Evil, the penalty for dying is that you start back at the very last place you saved. In the original games, 4 added fucking checkpoints, and that was stupid, and I hated it. But you start back at the last place you saved. So if you didn't save for an hour and a half and you died, you were fucked. Because you had to go back and do all of that shit over again. That was a pain in the ass. Yeah, there's no penalty for dying, and dying actually makes the game a little bit easier, which is stupid game design. It's fucking dumb. If you want people to be afraid of dying, make there be a penalty for dying. If you want, if you die and you're like, oh fuck, I have to, oh fuck, I have to go do an hour and a half worth of work again, fuck my life, then people will be in a corner. When they see a monster, they'll be, oh shit, and they will cower in a corner, being like, I don't want to die, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. Is it gone? Fuck, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. Like, that will scare people. If there was an actual penalty for being dead, that will instill fear of dying in people, and therefore a fear in your monsters. Moving on to my next point, which I have forgotten. I was just thinking about it, but now I can't think of what it is. Oh, limited resources. Okay. We touched on this a little bit earlier with Resident Evil and how you have limited ammo, so you have to make a choice, right? Well, the other thing in Resident Evil that you have is a limited number of saves, right? Not so much in easy mode, but in harder modes, you have to conserve your ink ribbons, okay? So you can't be saving every time you're like, oh, I did 5 minutes. Okay, go back and save. Alright, did that. Okay, go back and save. This ties into the no penalty for dying thing, because there is no saving really in Amnesia. You die and then you go back. You're back where you were. Everything has been completed already. But ink ribbons, your saves are your ammunition, your health, and your saves are limited resources in Resident Evil. So you have to be very careful about how you use them. And if you're being very conservative, if you're saving every 5 minutes, you're going to run out of saves, and that's bad. Because you're going to end up at a point where you have no saves, and you're going to die, and you'll be like, oh, fuck. I have to go do an hour and a half worth of shit over again because I didn't have enough ink ribbons because I used them all really early on. Or if you're very conservative about your ink ribbons and you're only saving every 30, 45 minutes, then if you die, you're like, oh, fuck. Well, obviously, we've discussed that Amnesia doesn't have saves. Amnesia's resources are your sanity, and your health. Your health... Oh, I'm sorry, cat. I think I ran over the cat with my chair. Your health is the most limited resource I found. There was a point where I had like 7 laudanum. But that was very near the end of the game, and I wasted it all by doing something really dumb. Oh, I kept reaching out and touching the portal, and it kept hurting me. Your real limited, what should have been a limited resource in Amnesia, was light. And they tried to make it a limited resource, but they failed miserably at it because I was never hurting for light. There was a point in the game where I had 52 tinderboxes, and I got that down to about 31 before I started hoarding them again. Because I was just like, you know what, I'm going to light every single lamp in this room because I have 52 tinderboxes, right? And at some point I had 17 things of lamp oil. So, like, I finished the game with probably around 17 things of lamp oil and over 40 tinderboxes. Just because they're everywhere. Like, if you explore the game, you will find all of that shit. And I didn't use it because I play Resident Evil and I'm used to hoarding my resources. So I was like, oh, this is probably a limited resource. I should not use this every 5 minutes. So I went without lighting things up for a long time. Most of the game. And at the point where I had 52 tinderboxes and like fucking double-digit lamp oil, I was like, almost done with the game, and I was like, I probably could have played the game lighting like every other torch and holding my lantern out in front of me almost the whole game, and I would have been fine. So that makes your limited resources, like you should be concerned that, oh man, I'm insane, I should use my lantern. Oh, but I don't have much lamp oil. You're never concerned about that because you always have a ton of lamp oil. You always have a ton of tinder boxes. So it doesn't create any fear there because your resources are not scarce. There's no reason to be afraid of that at all. Having, like, a lot of people will say that having scarce resources is an artificial sense of difficulty. It's not. It's an actual sense of difficulty, because you have to make choices. You have to decide when you should use something and when you should not use something. Now, it has created a generation of gamers like me that hoard everything because it might be useful later on and they don't want to run out of ammo for it early. Or people who play Amnesia like me, who are slow, methodical, search every single fucking room and find all of the tinder and all of the lamp oil and never use any of it because you're scared that you might actually need it at some point. That's not bad. If the game actually had limited lamp oil, I can tell you I'd be a lot more scared. Because well, maybe not. If the game actually had limited lamp oil, I probably wouldn't have been scared. I probably would have finished the game with only one thing of lamp oil and like 10 tinder boxes instead of 40 something and 17. Switch those numbers, 17 and 40 something. So yeah, there's no fear when you have unlimited resources. It's like having unlimited ammunition in like a first-person shooter. Like, you're like, oh, don't give a fuck, I'll just use it all the time. No big deal. I did not use it all the time, but I could have. I could have used lamps and tinder pretty much whenever I wanted, and had no concern about not having enough because I had tons. I had an excess of that shit. I wish I could donate to people who maybe were not that great. But that's that. The other thing about Amnesia that I was really excited about, I touched on this a little bit earlier. This is actually a good thing. Actually, no. I'm gonna knock it one more time. I'm gonna knock a little bit of the mechanics. It's essentially a point-and-click adventure game. It is Myst. It is Myst from what, 1995, and it is now 2011. I don't know actually when it came out. Amnesia did, but it's basically Myst. Myst was actually more unnerving than Amnesia because of how alone you are in Myst. I played Myst when I was like 10 years old, and I was obviously awful at it because you're retarded when you're 10 years old. The puzzles in that game are actually difficult. But it was really unnerving because you are alone. You are entirely, there are no enemies, there are no friends, there are no NPCs. You are entirely alone in Myst. You are not alone in Amnesia. No matter, there is always Alexander. Daniel leaves notes for you. There are all the other people that Daniel murdered. You're always hearing them. There's Agrippa, and there are enemies. Like, you never actually feel alone. So Myst actually succeeds in being scarier than Amnesia does. And that's pretty impressive. The other thing, the reason I'm bringing up Myst is because it is a point-and-click adventure game, which I could describe Amnesia the same way. Even though you have control of your character and you can move through space, you interact with everything by clicking on it. And that was not always translated so well with certain things, which was just a frustration. They could have refined that a little bit more and made it a little bit better. Now, for some good things about Amnesia, the writing is excellent. It kept me compelled. I was fascinated to find out more about the game. I was fascinated to continue playing just to learn more. And that's always good. That's great. The other thing is that it has multiple endings, which you can actually just reload the game when you get to the orb chamber and experience all three of them without ever having to go play the game again. And that's cool. And you know, some of the endings we discussed it, like they seem unsatisfying at first, but when you think about them, all of the endings are actually pretty good. They're well written, and like they might seem a little bit unsatisfying at first when you think about the implications of each ending, um, and what they kind of mean. To each one kind of explores a little bit of a relationship between Daniel and Alexander, and to a lesser extent Agrippa, and kind of how you feel about the different characters, how you as a person feel. I really particularly enjoyed the what is called the revenge ending, because that is the way I felt towards Alexander and towards Daniel. And I felt like that was the redemption ending. I felt like that was the best ending. But the other endings, like depending on how you feel towards Alexander and Daniel and the things that they have done, the other endings are actually pretty good too. So that's kind of my opinion on it. And that's I think really cool. They're way better than the endings for Deus Ex Human Revolution. Let me tell you that, because those endings sucked. But yeah, that's those are my thoughts on Amnesia. I am in no way saying that it's a bad game. I'm just saying it's not scary, and there are things that could be done to make it both scary and a better game. I'm kind of glad it's over with. It was short. It took me somewhere 9 to 10 hours to finish the game. So that's it took me 2 days essentially. I did it on Sunday night for 5 hours, or Saturday night for 5 hours, and then 4 to 5 hours last night, and I finished it. 2 sittings, not that scary. Dead Space took me a lot more to finish because it scared the piss out of me. I was always terrified to start playing it. And I saved every 15 minutes and I quit playing every time I found a save location. But yeah, those are my thoughts in Amnesia. I'm going to upload some highlights from last night of where I actually got really scared, the 2 times that happened. In the entire game, and I'm going to upload this as well. Oh, this is over 30 minutes, and I'm sure you don't really give a fuck about me talking about this game for 30 minutes, but don't care. This is my opinion. These are my thoughts. If you actually want to sit through all of this, good for you. If not, well, I guess you won't be hearing this, but thanks for being a trooper, and I'll talk to you all later.